All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the High Ground Podcast. I am your host, Darth Chaco, and I'm excited because I have a bunch of people who I have been able to meet over this time, awesome content creators, and just cool people who all happen to be teachers, who all happen to love Star Wars. I'm not convinced that's just a coincidence, but we're going to go into it a little bit further. We're going to do that right now on the High Ground. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the High Ground Podcast. How's everyone doing today? Woo!
I'm good. Sorry.
No, I get that. My
Sorry.
dog Suki makes a lot of appearances in the same vein. So,
I'm sorry. She was just like barking at something under the thing, so I wanted to kind of grab her before she. I'm sorry. Go on. Just don't.
I was going to say that's also fitting for teachers because anytime I have a pet in a kid's classroom or like a kid's room where they're doing their Zoom, I'm like, you got to show me the pet. It's the pet text.
Yeah.
Required.
Awesome. I love it. Well, we'll get started. And again, for everyone, this is, meant to be conversational. I usually call on someone to get things started, but feel free to jump in with your guys' stories, and we don't have to stick too closely to the script. But I want to start by getting everyone to tell us, who are you, where we can find your content, and it's a couple things here. There's a multifaceted question, right? If you are a teacher in Star Wars, what do you teach in Star Wars? Are you a Mandalorian instructor? Are you teaching younglings? Are you I don't know, teaching Skywalkers in the Chiss Ascendancy? I just read the new Thrawn book and it's awesome. So yeah, what do you teach? Who's your star pupil? If you're training Boba Fett and you're like, this guy's an idiot, and who's the worst? I imagine Anakin's the worst student of all time, but that's just me. For this, I'm going to go to Fern first.
Hello. So I'm Fern. You can find me at on TikTok at alwaysfern. I also co-host a podcast with Julia called Star Wars English Class. And hang on, I got to pull up my notes because I've already forgotten the questions.
What would you like to teach in Star Wars?
Oh, yes. So, I think I would have to be some sort of instructor within the Jedi Order. It would not be a Fern appearance on a podcast if I don't talk about the Jude Watson Jedi Apprentice and Jedi Quest books. And in those books, we get to see a little bit of everyday Jedi life, including some of the classes Padawans and younglings take. And so I think I would probably teach not any sort of lightsaber course or piloting course, but I don't know, a Jedi history course. I'm an English teacher in real life, but I feel like I could really get behind teaching Jedi history to 14-year-old Padawans. So I think that's what I teach. And I think the star student would have to be Reath Silas, right? He is probably the best student in the entire Star Wars canon to date. And
you stole my answer.
It's the go-to answer. He's a good boy. A very dedicated, diligent student. I have to say, Anakin Skywalker was my first go-to response for worst student. I don't know if I want to label anyone that way. I don't know if I want to label anyone as the worst student, but challenge.
It doesn't mean that they can't be reached. It just I don't know. But all right, I appreciate it. Let's go to Matt next.
So, if I could teach anything in Star Wars, that's a tough one, honestly. I've always been drawn to the Jedi, always. Ever since I was a little kid. Yeah, the Mandalorians were cool. The clones were always cool. The soldiers and stuff. But Hazel, you agree? but I think I would definitely be a Jedi. I think the best student I could possibly ask for, I think, would probably be Obi-Wan, just because I just think he's the GOAT. He's always been one of my favorite characters, or Ahsoka, just because I'm biased. But I think the worst, again, my worst would probably have to be Anakin as well. Like, that's just kind of the obvious answer for a lot of these. Or Pong Krell. Pong Krell is always the answer for the worst of anything.
That's true. Pong Krell misunderstands the assignment.
Best description.
Sure. And then also, real quick, where can we find you and your content?
Oh, yeah. Forgot about that part. You can find me on TikTok at The Matman Show. I do like Church of Star Wars skits, voice impressions, things like that. Star Wars, Marvel, nerd things, all things nerdy.
Yeah, awesome content. I've been following
Thank
you
you
forever, so I appreciate you coming out and slumming
Absolutely.
it over here.
Absolutely.
And then and we also have Sarah, Miss Marauder.
Hey.
Your thoughts?
So I'm Sarah. You can find me on TikTok at Miss Marauder. My content is a little all over the place, but right now it's mostly me and my daughter dressing up in our Agatha Harkness cosplays. I think I want to say if I was a teacher in Star Wars, I would like to pick something cooler. It's like the Harry Potter thing where you want to say that you teach defense against the dark arts, but really it's the history of magic. I think it would probably be like, I'm an English teacher, so it would probably be like deconstructing the Jedi texts, looking for the themes of, the stories and things like that. I think I'm going to go with an unconventional pick for my best student. I'm going to say Finn, because I am also a teacher that's worked with adult students, and adult students that are trying to further their education always have like a real big drive to it. So I think finding out that he's force sensitive later in his life, I think he's going to feel like he has something to prove and he's going to really go above and beyond. I'm going to have a controversial pick for worst student. I'm going to say Grogu. And I'm going to say that not because Grogu is going to be a bad student, but because his dad is going to be hitting me up constantly. Not that I would complain, but he's going to be like, why do you get it this grade? When's this one due? Give me a status report. He's going to be really kind of, one of those parents that won't leave me alone. So because of that, I would start to get a little bit annoyed with him.
I could see him being a helicopter dad for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I apologize. Did I get you, Julia? You dropped out for a second, and I messed with my mind.
No, I haven't got. I did. I'm assuming the audio is. I'm following the audio. I'm not following people's faces because I'm hearing things, and I'm not. Might just be me not seeing the faces moving. So I'm going to assume that if I'm following the audio,
That's
okay.
a good assumption. Everything else is moving. I can see everyone clearly.
I'm not talking over anyone because right now Sarah is speaking on video to my eyes. So creepy.
That's odd. Just close your eyes. Close your eyes and barrel through.
I'll just do it. But yeah, I'm Julia. Julia Christine 77 on TikTok. I am the other host of Star Wars English Class podcast with Fern. I am a fourth-year PhD student, PhD candidate. I should make sure I give myself the credit of having passed my exams. So I actually teach at the university level right now. Right now I'm teaching Renaissance literature survey and a Shakespeare course. That's primarily what I teach. And I forgot what the questions were. Oh, okay. What do I teach? Well, that's a good question. I am also an English. So some people might disagree with me using the word teacher at all. I've never taken a pedagogy class generally. I've taken writing pedagogy, but if you go into grad school, you try to get a PhD in English to be a professor, most of the time you're not going to be required to take pedagogical classes or teaching required classes. So I often say instructor.
Well, I don't know what that means.
Respectful. Pedagogy is like the philosophy of learning and teaching. So you're not required to take classes on how to be a teacher, which is weird. So I usually call myself an instructor because some people don't appreciate that. Buster, don't eat my soup.
That
Um,
explains a lot about college professors now that I know.
yeah, so some of them are naturally, good at it, and some of them aren't, and you usually don't get any real. You might get sort of your advisor, observing you and sort of helping you through that. But also, some professors are more interested in research than they are in teaching. I happen to be teaching focused. That's what I primarily want to do. You did not sign on to this podcast episode to hear about the differences between teachers and instructors, so I will stop talking about it. But if I what I'd be teaching in Star Wars, probably something similar to what Fern said. Although I do love the restricted section of the library, the Bogan collection. So if I could work in the library and tell people to not go there to like the restricted section, that would kind of be my dream. Best student, I agree, would be Reith. Worst student, it's really hard to tell because we don't see a lot of in-class. But in terms of teachability, Anakin does multiple times not learn the lesson he's being explicitly taught. So that would be hard to be, like people rag on Luminara for trying to teach him the exact lesson that he needed to learn in order to not become a Sith Lord, for example. So now I'm caught up. Now I can see everybody. All right, that's my answer. I'm done speaking now. Cool.
Awesome. No, I love it, and yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. For a lot of things, and I do feel like Luminar gets too much hate for the for what happens. She doesn't get off scot clean, but yeah. Awesome. And we seem to have lost Matt, but I'm sure he is going to pop back up momentarily. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump forward. Here he goes. Need to make sure he is.
I'm back.
Appreciate it.
What happened?
all of the things. Actually, the whole podcast is over, so
Yeah, we're done now.
I apologize. I want to go around now and also find out about how you guys got into Star Wars. What's your favorite part of it and how has it shaped you? Because I feel like for most of us here, it has shaped up a lot of us. And actually, just before that, let me let's talk to the chat for a brief moment, because I asked what things they would teach, and we'll see what awesome answers we got. So I got no surprise there, Chris, Jedi lawyer, Jedi and the law. Camilla Bodaka Wookie, what can I teach that will let me teach Padme?
I don't think Padme went to school. I think she was like a lot of Nebulians, she was a prodigy and like just was the leader of the planet. I don't know that she ever went to school. I have a lot of questions about the public school system on Naboo, but that's a question for another time.
It's all I can tell you is it's good. It's it produces a lot of really strong strong academic people. Let's see. Friend says we want to change her answer. Jedi for folklore and teach Comac. That would be awesome. Element would teach defense against the conspiracy of Grey. I love it. And we're all super stoked that we're going to have to start saying Dr. Julia Christine.
I mean, at some point in the future, if I ever finish my dissertation, then yes. But I'll let you know when that happens.
Awesome. Wonderful. All right. But yeah, how did everyone start getting into to Star Wars? Like, what does it mean to them? I'll go to Sarah first.
Oh, awesome. So mine is a visual answer because the internet is out in my home. So I am at my parents' house right now, and I am in my brother's childhood bedroom. So you can see there is Star Wars wallpaper on the wall. These framed posters here were given out at Burger King in the 80s. I have like a how tall are you based on a Wookiee over here, and then I've got the toys. So my dad liked Star Wars and watched them at the theaters when they first came out, and I think back in that time it wasn't like fashionable to be an adult that was super into something like this. Can't imagine. But he passed it on to us. He showed us Star Wars. I don't remember the first time I watched Star Wars, but I have very fond memories of playing with the action figures with my brother growing up. Specifically, he once dropped his Han Solo into like a big drain that we were pretending was the Sarlacc pit and lost him forever. And he is now 35 years old, and I still make fun of him for it. He still remembers how much he cried. So I feel like it really primed me for a life of nerddom. It normalized it right off the bat. So that, then later when I got into Harry Potter and Shakespeare and super, kind of embraced it. It was very natural. Although I do get very jealous I have a 4.5-year-old daughter who gets to get kids' clothes that are Star Wars, which is not something I experienced being a young lady in the early 90s. There was not a lot of merch for me. So we had to kind of make our own costumes and stuff like that. And then, I still do, but yeah. So it's been passed down through many generations in my family. I'm now making my daughter a 3rd generation Star Wars fanatic.
Awesome. And she will thank you for it eventually.
Yeah.
Or talk about you weirdly in therapy. But
yeah. Probably both.
I had a Han Solo action figure that was him on Endor with the coat, and I remember playing with it in my backyard, and there's a little section of my backyard that to me looked a lot like Endor, a miniature version from Northern California. It was not too far off, and so I had him spend the night to see if he could survive in the in my makeshift Ewok village. And then my dog ate most of him.
I could probably find him. I know that I have him. We have the big like C-3PO and Darth Vader heads that open up, and they have all the action figures inside. And they're somewhere in this house. I could probably. I'll text
you
my
both
dad.
Succeeded where Boba Fett failed. You killed, and Jabba, like they were gonna try to get him in the Sarlacc pit, and your brother did it successfully. So yeah. I think that's actually very, very impressive.
That's goals. It's our goals. But yeah, how about you, Julia? What started getting you into it?
I actually, speaking of visuals, I found this recently when I was at my mother's house. This is the episode 1, Phantom Menace Storybook, which has one of my favorite pictures I've ever seen. I just want everyone to see this. Look at this. It's like, this is the most 90s image I think I've ever witnessed in my life. So that was my introduction, was the Phantom Menace. I've been deeply in love with Obi-Wan Kenobi since I was 5 or 6 years old. I can't remember exactly when that movie came out, before or after my birthday, but that was it. I was a prequels child, and then I think I probably watched the original trilogy between 1 and 2, and then went from there. I had a doll, an Obi-Wan like action figure that was the star of most of my Barbie-related dramas. Many complex storylines were created. And I remember playing with friends, and they'd be like, I don't understand why you don't have normal Ken dolls, and you have this, like, don't worry about it. This is Obi-Wan. He's going to be here as we play with our Barbies. I know, like, the slightly different size than everyone else, but we can just be imaginative, and it will be fine.
Well,
that's kind of how I get in it.
We love a short king, and
yeah, exactly.
And who's going to choose Ken over Obi-Wan, you know?
Exactly. And yeah, I didn't let them anyway, so it was fine. But my parents were not huge Star Wars fans. My parents were nerdy in different ways, but not in that way. So my brother and I kind of got into it on our own. We very much were like, no, the prequels look cool. Like, I'm 6 years old, and this is dope as hell. So I'm very much into this.
I love it. I mean, real quick, I gotta shout out Santiago Rengoku, I would want to teach Anakin to change his fate. Um, and I also like that everyone isn't dumping on Anakin, but they're being real. That's what we love. You know, we recognize, we enjoy the character. He's not a role model. Don't do what he did. Just saying. How about you, Matt?
So I pretty much got I can't even remember what Star Wars I watched first when I was a kid. I was so young. I don't remember if it was the prequels or the original. I think it was the original trilogy, but my earliest memories are from like the prequels because those are the movies I went to. I actually went to the movies physically to go see them. I pretty much kept Hasbro in business through the 90s. I bought so many action figures. The biggest thing we would do, we would always play with the lightsabers. Anytime they ever came out with a new lightsaber, like we would out in the summer, we would play like literally in the middle of the street with lightsabers, just going at each other. Those things hurt your hands. Anybody who's ever played with them, like seriously, you need to wear gloves when you use them because if you get hit, they hurt. And we played for keeps. But I just remember like loving all of the movies. I pretty much watched all of them as they came out. I grew up with it. It was one of my favorite series as a kid. I remember my first FX Lightsaber. I actually have it up there. I've been meaning to do a video about it. It was Mace Windu's one lightsaber, and like the original ones, the heavy, like. And I remember playing with it quite literally almost the entire night or the entire weekend. It did not leave my side. I just kept turning it off and on, just to see the blade go up because it was just so cool. I've loved all of the movies. Even to this day, I still love all the movies. My favorite piece of Star Wars, though, has to be, I think, the Clone Wars TV show. I watched those when they came out, and I've kind of kept up with it ever up to like season 7. And I think I like it so much because it has the nostalgia factor of the prequels that I really loved growing up with. But it also, you know, as I got older, I started to recognize some of maybe the writing issues and dialogue with the prequels that a lot of other people have pointed out. But I felt like, as someone who studied a little bit of film in college, the Clone Wars kind of brought that nostalgia and kind of really good cinematography and, you know, dialogue and animation, and it brought it all together. So it was like the best of both worlds.
No, that's good. I like that a lot. And Fern?
Yeah, so I watched Star Wars as a kid, mostly with my dad and brother. So I have like early memories of watching the movies. But the first sort of moment where I became a fan myself was when I discovered, not a second callback in the first 20 minutes of this episode, but the June Watson Star Wars books when I was about 12 or 13 years old. And over the course of one summer, I just went back to the library and read as many of these books as I could, never in the right order because they never had them, you know, in stock at the library in sequential order. And then that same summer, I watched the Clone Wars and watched the prequels really for the first time. I think I had probably seen them before, but I had not paid a ton of attention. And just over the course of this one summer, fell totally in love with Star Wars. And I think a big part of it for me was that what I knew of Star Wars up until that point was mostly contained to the original trilogy, like a little bit of knowledge of the prequels that was sort of passed on to me from my younger brother, actually. But to suddenly get to explore these familiar characters and like very different points in their life, very different circumstances than I was familiar with, felt really exciting and like opened up so many possibilities. And so like I started writing Star Wars fan fiction that same summer, and it was just a new way to explore there were lots of new stories to explore, and I think that's what made it finally click in my brain for me, that I really loved this world and wanted to, explore it some more.
Awesome. Oh, I love it. Okay. Well, so we all became fans pretty young, and I guess the other part of it is how has it shaped us, as well as, is this linked to how you guys teach, or what made you want to teach? Is there any sort of connection? And this one, I'll kind of open it up because I want this to be a conversation. I want to hear if you guys have similar experiences and all that stuff. I guess I'll tell Matt to start, but everyone else feel free to jump in.
So, I did not go to school for teaching. Teaching is something that kind of just happened. I went to school for illustration and visual development, and actually ended up working at Hasbro for a couple of years after college, because I never really grew up. I always loved toys. I tried to get into the Star Wars department so many times, didn't get in, but it's okay. But I was a very outgoing person. I was a very, kind of hands-on person. And I unfortunately ended up getting let go from Hasbro after so many years. And while I was trying to find a new job in the industry, my mom was kind of just like, "You'd be a good teacher. Why don't you just go do that?" And I'm like, maybe, yeah. So I took the tests because I did have a degree. So in Massachusetts, if you have a degree, you can just take the MTELs. So you can just take the tests in whatever field you want to go into. I did. I ended up subbing for a little bit in 2017. I started it and just immediately fell in love with it. And I've been teaching full-time since 2018. But yeah, it kind of just, I stumbled into it, but it was never something that was really planned, but it was, I love it. And I don't think I could see myself really doing anything else.
What subject, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I guess this sort of ties into like, so I couldn't really find a way to tie it into like Star Wars and stuff and how it inspired me.
If it doesn't tie in, it doesn't tie in. That's cool. I'm along for the ride. I'm enjoying this.
It does tie in a little bit. So I teach graphic design and digital photography. I did some visual development work in college. That's what I kind of studied in, because I liked movies and I wanted to do pre-production work for animation. So that's why I guess the Clone Wars is also one of my favorite shows. It's because I'm an animation nerd. So, being able to teach that kind of stuff, to kids is really important to me. So kind of like that visual art style, like Lucas pioneered special effects, he pioneered design and characters and world building. So I try to incorporate a lot of that stuff when I do teach. Maybe not necessarily like specifically like, guys, we're going to learn about Star Wars today. We're going to try to tie everything into Star Wars. But I grew up watching that and like falling in love with the visual media. So it did inspire me to at least become an artist, which, then led to me being a teacher.
Yeah, absolutely.
I jumping off of becoming a teacher on accident, I became a teacher against my wishes, almost. So my mom is a teacher, and I was always like, I'm not going to be a teacher. Obviously, I was a nerdy kid. I became a theater kid in high school. And then when I was a senior in high school, my theater teacher was like, hey, why don't you work with some of the younger students and, do improv games with them and stuff. And it was my first time working with them and teaching them the stuff. And I was like, damn it, I like teaching them. And it was this very frustrating realization of like, oh, okay, yep, this is something I like doing. So I went to college, floundered around for a bit, as one does in their first years of college. And then it became very clear as I started kind of substitute teaching for money, for a little extra money. It was like, okay, I I'm gonna do this. I do think that the English teacher Star Wars fan Venn diagram is very close to a circle. I feel like a lot of times, yeah. I mean, not to say anything against math, but I always tell people when they say, "What do you teach?" and I'm like, "Well, based on the everything about me, I teach English. You know, I'm a high school English teacher." Um, so we do get to tackle Star Wars every once in a while, especially I teach a mythology and folklore course, and we tackle the hero's journey. So obviously we're going to talk about Star Wars then. And then we usually have, I am the English teacher that everyone like sits in there with lunch, you know, at lunch, and they want to hang out with me, which is delightful. And so they'll have like designated times with like hang out with Miss Z while she yells about Star Wars visions, you know. It's that kind of thing where if they want to distract me and not do their work, they know they can be like, didn't a new episode of The Mandalorian come out last week? And I'll be like, oh my God, and, you know, and then they're like, oh, we're going to run out of time for our quiz, things like that. So I think it's more Star Wars is a tool for my students to distract me from what we're supposed to be talking about most of the time. And it's usually pretty effective.
Man, I wish I had teachers as cool as you guys.
I had a very similar journey. My mom is a teacher, but she teaches little kids, first grade. And so all growing up, people would ask me, do you want to teach like your mom? And the answer was no, like, not really. I'm not interested in it. And then when I was in college, I was hired as a TA to work with one of my professors over the summer. He taught like high school students who would come on campus to do college courses over the summer. And I just loved it. I loved it so much. And I don't think that I was going to dive straight into teaching from there. Like, I think I needed a little more of a push. And the push was I was graduating college a year early and had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And so I decided, well, grad school, master's in teaching, let's do that. And it just turned out that like I stumbled into something that I really love. But it's funny when I look back now because I see these connections that were never clear to me in the moment, but are clear in retrospect of the things I love about Star Wars are the moments between teachers and students, the relationships between teachers and students. I really believe that like that is what Star Wars is all about. It's about teachers and students. It's about the way we pass on knowledge. And like the thing that drew me to especially like the prequel era stuff was caring about that mentorship between, you know, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and then Obi-Wan and Anakin, and then Anakin and Ahsoka. And then, you know, having this strange transition from having relationships like that with my professors and really looking up to them and valuing their knowledge and their insight to then shift to becoming more of that figure for my students. Just parallels that were not necessarily clear as I was like making decisions that led me to become a teacher, but just seems so obvious now.
I don't remember in high school when I decided that I wanted to be an English professor. I truly have no recollection of making that decision. I applied to one undergraduate school and then I went to that school. So it's kind of like a fugue state. I don't really remember the process of like deciding that was going to be what I did. I remember I started the semester, I think after one day I was a BSED student, and then I was like, no. And so then I dropped that, and then I was just did a BA in English. My mom got her PhD when I was in elementary school, and then she became a special education professor. And so that was definitely a huge push in terms of higher education. It's great, but my mother, has her doctorate, and her mom, my grandmother, has 2 master's degrees. So I did come from a line of like, the expectations for postgraduate work was really high. It was just a matter of like, you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a professor. Like, those are your options. And I'm very fortunate that one of them was one that I wanted to pursue. I knew I wanted to teach, but I wasn't sure that high school was really going to work well for me. And so far, teaching at the college level has been fantastic. It's incredibly difficult to get a steady, reliable job in that field. So we'll see if I get to keep doing it. But in terms of connections with Star Wars, yeah, I do think the Venn diagram between English teachers and Star Wars fans is pretty much a circle. The storytelling, I teach Shakespeare, so like to me, it's always been kind of obvious. I'm like the big dramatic family conflicts with the wars and the dramatic reveals and the betrayal. That, yeah, I know that. I'm totally on board with what that is as a story. That is
Maul and his whole deal.
Maul is just, he can't lie to you, Dave Filoni. I know that William Shakespeare got in a time machine, and that time machine showed up at Dave Filoni's house, and it said, I saw the prequels, and I think you should bring Maul back. I have some notes. And then he revealed his plan for Maul's revenge arc, and then he said, I can't wait to see how it turns out. And then got back in his time machine and just, knew that he was planting seeds in a garden he would never see, but that it was going to turn out really well for him. I believe that strongly. You can't tell me I'm wrong. But another thing about this sort of PhD situation is something very specific I relate to in Star Wars is like, I know what it's like to have a grand master. Like that's a thing. I have my PhD advisor has a PhD advisor who had a PhD advisor. That is a type of mentorship relationship that I am deeply familiar with, where like the Padawan master relationship is very similar to what a lot of PhD advisorships are like, where it's just you and this person learning sort of as you go, learning from them. And you are in many ways learning from the lessons they learned from their advisor. And you're part of an academic lineage, which is a very weird concept to kind of wrap your head around. But that's very similar to Jedi. It's like the disaster lineage, etc. I am part of a lineage of sorts, except for Jedi, it's for academics. And so I don't know what it would be called. Probably just totally okay, middle of the road lineage, which is good for me. I'm not saying that my advisor is bad. I'm saying I think I'm probably like, you're always just kind of like maybe bringing it down a little bit due to the state of the sort of university system. That's a joke, but he's fantastic. Greg, if you saw this is not a dig at you.
Well, isn't that what you want though? I mean, you want to be the lowest, and that's I think it works.
I think it makes everybody else look better by default, which is fun. Good for them.
I love the mention of the mentor-mentee relationship, because I thought about it and I was like, oh, that's why the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special is my favorite piece of Star Wars media, because it's all about that. It's all about Rey learning to be a better teacher through all the greatest hits of mentor-mentee Jedi relationships.
Yeah, when that special came out, I was like, wow, they made this just for me. They tapped into my brain and they knew exactly what I wanted and they gave it to me.
Yeah, it's complicated because I feel like, I am teaching people that are the age of Luke and Leia and Rey and Finn, and like young adults sort of finding out who they are and like discovering themselves. But a lot of what we see in terms of like formal teaching in Star Wars is adolescence, and like that is something I don't have a lot of experience with, and also seems incredibly complicated. It seems like you're responsible for more than just the formal education of your Padawan. You're responsible for like their holistic everything. And I feel like as teachers, even at university, I can understand like that idea of having boundaries between how much you get involved in like the personal lives of your students, for example, and the idea that as a master you just live with them. it's a very interesting dynamic to me.
Yeah,
how close they
different.
are.
And I feel very confident that that's why Vanessa Rowe is such a good student, is she has less entanglements elsewhere. And yeah, you can't change my mind. Star Wars Lawyer had to jump in and say, Julia, was that a Hamilton reference nestled in there?
I'm making an Obi-Wan Kenobi playlist on Spotify, and unfortunately, I did realize that "The World Was Wide Enough" was the first song I thought of when I was making that playlist. So I've just been thinking about it a lot. I'm not proud of it. It's very I know it's very normie, but it's pretty much. I mean, who is Aaron Burr if not Anakin Skywalker? You know what I mean?
My students are constantly talking to me about Hamilton because their history teacher doesn't like Hamilton. So whenever they try to bring it up to her, she's like, go talk to Miss Zidney about it. Go talk to Missy about it. She's gonna I don't like Hamilton. So then they'll come into my class next and go, we have a Hamilton thing we have to talk to you about.
Can I also throw, in addition to English teacher, theater kid? There's a Star Wars English teacher, theater kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. And
I made a video about this, but that's what Maul needed. Sorry, I'm not on brand if I'm not talking about Maul at all times, but he needed to be a theater kid. That would have saved his life. I made a video about this. He needed to be a Shakespearean actor. And if he had gotten that chance, he never... I mean, it's not his fault that he was abducted.
I mean, he still was a Shakespearean actor.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Is he just didn't know that was a career option for him?
In my mind's eye. You're like, people don't talk like that, dude.
Yeah. He's just auditioning for something we don't know about. It's all a big audition.
Forward Into the Black said, best quote from the sequels is, "We are what they grow beyond." And that's that teacher relationship you guys are talking about. Man, I'm sorry, I'm just loving this conversation.
That actually reminds me. Sorry, I didn't mean, because I just remembered. I use Yoda's. I am like the resident I like Episode 8 person, and
my favorite.
Use that.
This one's 8.
Go.
What are you specifically not saying the name of it because the name of it makes people angry?
No, I like The Last Jedi. I'll say it. I like The Last.
If you say it 3 times, you actually summon toxic fans. So just be careful, because I've made that mistake in the past, and they're not very good past guests.
Oh yeah. I get tons of them. It's fine. It'll always be my favorite. It was me and my fiance's first date. So no matter what, it could have been absolute horrible tripe, and I would have loved it because of that. But I quote Yoda almost all the time in my class. Not necessarily I don't think the kids have ever picked up on it, because if they knew I was quoting Yoda, they never would listen. But I always tell them, someone says "Oh, I screwed this up," or "Oh, I can't do this." I'm like, failure is the best teacher. We have to make mistakes in order to learn. So I say that a lot. Nobody really has ever picked up on it, and thank God for that. But a lot of them are like, "Oh, okay."
That's like me. I'm constantly quoting Game of Thrones to my daughter. The only time you can be brave is when you're afraid. I tell her that all the time, and I'm like, I know you're not picking up on this, but I'm very profound.
Yeah. She's gonna grow up and be like, "My mom told me this," and they'd be like, "What?"
She already told her teacher last week I was going to a wedding, and she said, I'm not allowed to come because they're going to drink the juice that makes them silly like kids.
Oh, no.
Good.
Beth asked Maul's favorite Shakespeare play. Would Hamlet be too mainstream? Great question. I think it's Lear. I just think it's incredibly nihilistic and dark. It's Lear or maybe Titus Andronicus.
Titus Andronicus, I was going to say that.
Yeah, it depends on which old hermit Maul has sort of, I refer to it as the Learification of Maul. He's grown into that role, but young Maul, Titus Andronicus, he's like, this is so cool, and his teacher would have been like, this is not, no, you're learning the wrong lesson. You do not need to cook anyone and put them in a pie, and he's like, already done it.
My tiny side note, specifically for you about Titus Andronicus, is I went to an all-girls private high school, and my freshman year we did Titus Andronicus.
Amazing.
And I just, it was wild. And someone's uncle or something worked on a horror movie set, so they had props of hands and severed heads, and we had blood capsules. We just went for it.
You gotta go for it when you're doing
awesome.
Titus.
Eleanor Marsh in the chat said in regards to Maul, the whole galaxy is his stage, and that he's constantly auditioning for Iago at every moment.
Also, need to shout out Eleanor Marsh is my best friend in the entire world, and I'm so glad she's here. Okay, that's my piece.
Hi, Eleanor.
Hi, Eleanor.
Element 7 said, did someone quote Yoda? And so I can represent Element properly, I'd have to say, looking? Found someone you have. I can't do voices very well. I leave that to Matt Man.
I have not done the voice. I don't do the voice when I do Yoda. I don't do that. That never ends well. Although I have done voices in the class, and it always freaks the kids out. It's like one of my favorite things to do.
So do the students like it? Are the students generally into Star Wars and the other geeky stuff that you guys are into? And the second question was, do the kids think you're cool?
No.
I have made a very long career of tricking students into thinking I'm cool by having green hair, piercings, and tattoos. So they think that I'm cool because I look different than their other teachers, and then they get to know me and they're like, you're a giant loser. But I find that the ones that like Star Wars, it's either like, yes, they think I'm cool, or no, they don't care about me at all. But a lot of high schoolers, a lot of those kids are really into anime. So they talk about anime a lot. I'm not super into anime, so they like to trick me by telling me to like, oh, watch One Piece. It's really short. And I'm like, I know that's not true. But I'll have, when I'm in my actual office, I have like my Mandalorian helmet and my cosplay stuff behind me. So I usually throw it out like Easter eggs for them, where they'll be like, hey, is that a Mandalorian helmet? Or like, is that a lightsaber? Or, oh, is that, the different nerdy stuff I kind of have around me. And then we use that to strike up a conversation. But they're also, I grew up with the originals, and then I didn't have cable. So I did not have the ability to watch Clone Wars until like 2 years ago. And I hated the prequels when they came out and didn't even watch the second one. So they all love the prequels, but so there's a bit of a disconnect. I do have some arguments with them about things every once in a while, but we can all agree that like lightsabers are dope, and the Mandalorian is great, and like the baby Yoda on my desk is cute. So like at that level, and especially with high schoolers, like you got to just get them engaged with you, like, and that little hook is what gets them. So usually it's enough of a surface level of like, you have a lightsaber behind you. Lightsabers are cool. I also like Star Wars, and that's enough to be like, cool, we have an open dialogue now.
Yeah, now you say that, I had an English teacher, his name was Mr. Strom, and he skateboarded. But he was like, and so he was instantly cool, because I lived for skateboarding back in the day. And he was like this old school skater, but he was also the meanest and was the hardest on people who skateboarded. It was just, I don't know, it was funny. But like he got a pass because he skateboarded.
Someone in the chat on YouTube asked how the high school kids feel about the sequels. They hate them. I got into my students do a podcast, and we did a Star Wars one for May the 4th. And they were talking about Rey doesn't get to be a Skywalker. And I said, well, she's allowed to change her name. And they were like, well, she can't just say it. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Did you miss the deleted scene where she went to the courthouse and filled out the paperwork? And then we were talking about Finn. And I said, well, Finn changed his name from, FN2187. And they were like, well, yeah, he didn't want to be associated with something bad like the Empire. And I was like, okay, so it's okay for Finn, but not Rey Palpatine? She gets that name, and we got into there's like a whole, I think there's like a 5-minute long me like yelling at high school being like, why does Finn get to do it but Rey doesn't get to do it? Haven't you ever, like, you can get a name change. My brother just got married. You can go down and do it. So yeah, they definitely don't like them. They're definitely prequels generation high schoolers as of right now. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was... Oh, go ahead,
I was
Julia.
thinking that's so strange, because they're like 10 plus years younger than me, and like being the actual demographic for the prequels, I'm like, how has that happened culturally where like the sequels would have been the demographic for them? So that's so interesting to me that's the case. I'm fascinated by that.
I feel like that's how it worked last generation too, though. Um, Largely, but I don't know. There's a whole. I don't know.
I was originals generation, and then I hated the sequels. So these guys are prequels generation, and they hate the sequels. They like the the one before the newest one. So my child will like the sequels and hate whatever the Obi-Wan
Whatever's
show.
next.
If she hates that, she'll just get kicked out of my house.
Hopefully we'll break that cycle. Any more stories on your guys' kids thinking you're awesome or just the worst?
I have to remember to not call them kids in my case because I am dealing with adults, and there is the impulse to refer to them as kids because I teach a lot of first-year composition, teach a lot of freshmen. I am pretty stealthy. I mean, I think they know that I'm a huge nerd. Like, my computer is covered in stickers, but they're covered in like Mandoa and then like Obatine stickers, so it's kind of like a deeper cut. No one has commented on them. I don't talk about Star Wars all that much except for in references, so I don't think they have any idea the level. But I also like being mysterious. That's very fun for me. So I like to have a little bit of like, who knows what I do when I leave. Yeah, and I also don't see them as often as if you're a high school teacher. So I only see them twice a week, and so I don't unfortunately form sort of as strong bonds as I would if I saw them more frequently. So that's kind of the situation I've got going on.
All right. Well, I got a lightning question for everyone. Who is the best teacher in Star Wars? You guys thinking about it? Who wants to go first?
Yoda. I say Yoda because everything that Luke did, he was on Dagobah for like 48 hours. And then everything in the next two movies was based on what he learned on Dagobah. So I got to say Yoda. Just for sheer like lessons to time ratio.
He has like a compressed knowledge nugget that he just like jammed in him. He's like, it's gonna take like a year before this all settles, but like trust the process.
I'm gonna actually say Qui-Gon, just because he brought us Obi-Wan, who is, as I've said, the GOAT. But also because I find that he was a good mix of, he was a part of the Jedi Order, but he went against it like Anakin did. He didn't really agree with everything that they did. He fought them a lot on some things. But essentially he kept the values intact. So I think that if Anakin, or if Qui-Gon had not died, and he had taught Anakin, and he had seen a lot of the stuff, because Anakin was also against the Jedi Order and stuff. I think he would have sympathized with that, but taught him how to do it in a healthy way. I think Qui-Gon would have kept Anakin from turning, because I think he would have seen a lot of himself in Anakin and been like, because he fought the Council a lot, and I think he had that good balance, because he noticed some of the faults with the Jedi Order, and I always thought he was one of the wisest. That's just my hot take.
You saying that makes me think, because my wife still speaks fondly, years after being out of school, about her old history teacher who would be like, okay, so the book tells us to learn this, but that's not what happened. This is what happened. And it would go off and be like, this is the history in the book. This is what happened from a different perspective. Do with all of this information what you will, but understand these things. So like it kind of feels like the same vibe with Qui-Gon.
I think it's interesting how many people are saying Kanan, and I don't disagree in terms of his quality, but I would have to say, going with the lineage, I think you got to say, obviously Mace was doing something right, and then Depa did something right, and then Kanan. So I think that there's a strength in that lineage in terms of teaching, where I feel like Mace Windu would have been harsh but fair, where like you would have gotten, he was following absolutely everything you needed to know, and I think the success of that lineage really shows whatever the program was that had been developed in that lineage really was working out well. It seemed to be a mixture of, because compassion and empathy are central, but so is sort of teaching the students skills and knowledge they need to know. For whether or not they want to learn those things, sometimes you have to, push in directions that are uncomfortable for growth. And so I think it seems like there was a sense of not boundary, but relationship there that we see that seems to have been very positive and very healthy. And in terms of like the best teacher, it's really hard to say because I feel like we don't see a lot of successful outcomes because they don't make for interesting stories as much as failures and challenges. So like, I think, for example, Rey's probably going to be a great teacher, but we'll only catch back up with her if one of her students fails horribly, right? Like we're not going to see like Rey's successful Jedi school. That's not going to be super interesting for people. And I find that fascinating. I will have to say about Yoda something that I'm sorry, Element, if you're still here. I think he's one of those teachers that should have retired and had been teaching the same syllabus for like a couple hundred years and never updated it. And is not had their heart in the right place and were teaching lessons that fit for a long, long time, and circumstances changed and they didn't like change the material to sort of keep up to date with what the students needed. Because we see him so happily teaching kindergarten in the High Republic and seems to be successfully doing that. And then, during the Clone Wars, it's like, he doesn't get to be a teacher anymore. And so it seems to be that he wasn't really able to sort of update that part of his teaching philosophy. I think they all need to write teaching philosophy statements, and then we can read them, and then we can decide.
I'm so mad at Inslee Kanan because he is the love of my life. But I guess I just don't think of him that way because I'm too busy being like, I only think of him as
that's like, oh, would you want Obi-Wan as your master? And I'm like, smooch face. What? I'm sorry. I'm just thinking that I can't. That's not no, because then we can't be together. Like that's not gonna. So no, I don't want that. Like I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can't.
Element. He updated it after he died. That doesn't count. You can't update the curriculum after the Jedi Order has already fallen. That doesn't. That's too late. It's too late at that point. Like I'm glad he did it. He's like the conservative politician who retires and then is suddenly like, actually, I've had these progressive views the whole time. And you're like, where was this when you were actually in the Senate? You can't just say these things now that you don't have the power to change them. I'm sorry, this has turned into me ranting about Yoda, but I do think he did have some moments where it was like, great, this would have been good to know when you were in charge of the Jedi. I'll stop now. My Yoda rant is over.
Well, the way you say that though makes me think of like, what Mattman teaches. None of that was a thing when I was in school. That wasn't possible. You know what I mean? Like new stuff happens all the time, and there's always these big shifts in information and just society in general, and we kind of have to keep up to date with that. And
Element, you're arguing about numbers, and you always say it's not about the number of Sith and number of Jedi. I don't think it's about the number of students that went to the dark side and the number that were successful. The overall effect is what matters. So I'm saying he could have gone back to get some extra credits to keep up his license.
I'm just Team Yoda because if I could whack a student on the head with a stick, go to just a little walking stick, just give him a smack. Love it.
Yeah,
absolutely. Let's see. Fern, who did you have as your pick?
So I have a very similar view to Julia, which is that even though I do believe Star Wars is about teaching, about teachers and students, all of the teachers we see in Star Wars are deeply flawed, which is okay. We're all deeply flawed in our own ways. But my answer is Kanan, and not for the conventional reasons, I think. I think he becomes the best teacher, or at least the best teacher we've spent like a lot of time within the Star Wars canon, because he is bad at it when he first starts off. And becoming a teacher is a process of learning for him at the same time that, you know, Ezra is undergoing this process of learning. So I think he is able to become a great teacher because he starts from a place of really not knowing how to do that, how to fulfill that role. And he has to learn how he has to be intentional about the decisions he makes. And that helps him to become better at it.
That's interesting, because that is literally the exact opposite of what, you know, Julia said about Yoda. He's been teaching too long and wasn't able to update, versus Kanan, who's fresh and is getting real-time feedback from his students.
Yeah, and he doesn't have the system in place to support him, and so Kanan has to kind of figure out what to do without that system there supporting him, and he just has to kind of rely on, okay, what do I remember from being taught as a Padawan? What do I remember from Depa? And there's also the impact of like the trauma of what being a master means to him.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, a lot of the Jedi we see don't take on that mantle without it carrying a lot of emotional baggage, or being complicated in an emotional way. You know, Obi-Wan wasn't ready to be a master. You know, for example, so being forced to be a teacher when you're not ready for that relationship can be, you know, troubling and sort of sink or swim. And Kanan put in the work to do what Ezra needed. And he's definitely getting, you know, he's passing the praxis. It's not a problem. He's doing great.
And in the chat we have Eleanor Marsh, our best friend collectively, Eleanor Marsh. Kit Fisto, chillest man in the galaxy. Harris Productions also says Kanan Jarrus. Let's see, I'm jealous says Qui-Gon or Yoda. I literally still use Qui-Gon as a moral compass. Let's see, St. Pat with Qui-Gon. Camilla with Jorah Mali. Nice. Forward in the Black saying Qui-Gon or Jarl DePaul. Let's see. Worst is Soren Kreese. Yeah, I get that. Haley Corellia Coffee Works says Kanan as well. Brooke just says failure is. Which, I mean, yeah, she's not wrong.
Yep.
Star Wars lawyer Bail Organa is the best teacher. When you actually read things like the way he looks at and teaches, you know, Leia, it's actually really sweet. And Princess of Alderaan and a little tidbits in the Ahsoka book. Let's see here. Camilla says, "Oh, it's just proof that Bail and Bria are best co-teachers." Because just look at Leia. Man, these are awesome. Lots of awesome choices. As far as me, I have to say, I'm super biased, and I fully admit this. This is out of sheer bias, and I can't back it up. But Plo Koon just seems to have that gentle touch, but that firmness. You know what I mean? Like he just, I don't know. I just, like, if he told me to do something, I would just do it and just trust. Like, with the way he deals with those clones, and he's like, you know, you aren't expendable to me. Like he could see that insecurity in them and like knew what to say and how to say it and when to say it and his tonality. He goes on that mission with like a little short mission with Ahsoka, and it's like we can kind of see that everything I've seen of him leads me to believe he would be the best. I've seen very little of him, but all of it has been good.
I would also like to add, I think Ahsoka would be a really good teacher. I think we see throughout the Clone Wars these examples where she is put into these teaching positions, including at a certain academy that I don't know if Julia's planning on bringing up later.
I don't know if you've heard of it.
This academy, where is that academy, Julia?
So it's the Royal Academy of Government on Mandalore. You might not know this, but it's actually the same academy that Sabine went to. But earlier, Corky Kryze goes to this academy. but
Oh,
later
Corky?
it turns
Who's
into
that?
So Corky is Satine's nephew, and he goes to this academy. Again, Sabine goes to it later. It's a different school, same place. And she teaches a lesson there, and then they overthrow the prime minister. So, like, I think she said we could talk about corruption, or we could just destroy it. And I think that's very effective.
Project-based learning.
Project-based learning. She's like, Corky was like, I think we should just go fix it, and she's like, okay, and then they did that, and I think that's really powerful.
But we see her, with the younglings as well. We see her in these positions. I mean, even when she spends her time with Trace and Rafa Martez, right? She, I don't want to say she's taking on a teaching role there exactly. But I think there are these seeds that, had things gone differently, had things turned out a different way, I think Ahsoka would have been such a wonderful teacher. I think she was sort of being primed for that. And I love to see how that's a part of her training is slowly being given this responsibility and taking on these teaching roles within the Order.
You can't bring up that arc without me thinking of a guest recently, Brian of the Pink Milk podcast. Awesome dude, but every time it comes up, it's lesbian jumpsuit Ahsoka.
Yes, it is.
No, you great points. Harris Productions also mentions the same arc I was talking about of Plo Koon taking Ahsoka, and he takes her to the bar and asks, "Do you want to test your theory?" He still had control of the situation, but he let the student make their own hypothesis and come to the conclusion, and then be like, you were wrong. But
so shout out to that one dinosaur, Professor Emeritus, who just kind of hangs out at the library when Ahsoka loses her lightsaber, and then they go on an adventure. I like him; he does a great job. Also, Loden Greatstorm. You just kind of throw people out of windows sometimes to teach them. You know what I mean? You just got to do it. Those are two honorable mentions.
Absolutely. I love it. No, those are all good ones. All right, so next question. I mean, that was meant as a lightning round, but it didn't. We kind of exceeded that. Okay, I have to, and I know not all of you teach kids, but the question comes up since, a lot of you are English teachers. Is Star Wars for kids? And how do you think these lessons, these stories, this modern mythology affects young minds? I'm curious what you guys think about that.
A resounding yes for me, but that's also coming from being the parent of a almost 5-year-old now who loves Star Wars and loves watching The Mandalorian. Weirdly enough, I'm like, it's not too violent. She's fine. I think that I think that a lot of us that love the originals can get kind of married to them, but I don't think those are for kids. And the reason why is they're so long. We recently had her watch Empire Strikes Back for the first time. We were keeping her spoiler free. And that's such a long movie. They're on Hoth for so long. But with the cartoons, I mean, she loves Star Wars Rebels. She has a Sabine cosplay that she requested as soon as I got a 3D printer. And she's enchanted, I think, by the imagery of it. I think she doesn't, she can't go too deep on what's going on. Just like I think my students, particularly my freshmen, my 14-year-olds, probably aren't going super deep. They think that lightsabers are cool and the Force is cool. And then as they get, it's the same thing with any type of literature. As they get older, they're starting to see more things in it. They're starting to think more deeply about it. But I do think it can start, there's Star Wars material that can start at 4 years old. My daughter's, her middle name is Leia, so she's, but she's not, and I want to stress that it wasn't like Star Wars or no candy. I'll say, hey, what do you want to watch on TV? And she'll be like, I want to watch you, which is her code for The Mandalorian, because I do a Mandalorian cosplay and she does a Baby Yoda. So she'll be like, oh, I want to watch the one where he first meets him, and she'll want to watch that. So I do think that we can get kind of like up on our high horse about like how like, ooh, Star Wars is so deep, but you can take it as deep or as complex as you want to. If you want to think about it deeply, and if you're capable of that, you can. If you think lightsabers are dope, that's a perfectly okay way to watch it and experience Star Wars.
Yeah, I love it. And how about you, Julia? Any thoughts?
I agree 100%. The whole time I'm just thinking, Stanley Fish, you did it. Reader response theory, here you go. But yeah, the idea that Star Wars is that texts change over time based on your experiences with them, is pretty standard knowledge now. But the idea that that is a way that texts transform, I think it is for kids, but it doesn't. That doesn't mean it's also not for adults. But in terms of like the goal, in terms of who, I think if you create something with the intended audience of children, you have to create it with a level of sort of nuance and levels, like you were describing, where it can be accessed by multiple sort of levels. And as a result, you get something that can be enjoyed by so many different generations of people. If you're creating something that's, an R-rated action movie for adults, it's an R-rated action movie for adults. You don't have to consider different perspectives of different ages of your audience and sort of build in those different levels. And so it's a different assignment to do a Star Wars, because you have to consider to what extent you're sort of have your sort of central audience, but then different things that can be read in. And a lot of that's unintentional, right? The writers always sort of create things unintentionally that can be read. There, of course, are like adult novels specifically for adults, right? But they're sort of diversifying now, and they're children's books for children. But as a like entire universe of stories, it's for children in the way that stories are essential to empathy and learning. And so that's sort of where the foundational elements go. So that's, I guess, kind of my thought on it. Although I will say I probably, yeah, it's interesting to see how my own relationship with Star Wars had changed over time. When I was 6 years old, I was just like, the man with the weird ponytail is cute and I like him. And I still do think that. But now I have like, very sort of deep, complex sort of thoughts about his role. He's kind of like Horatio and Hamlet. He's sort of the witness to these things, and he has to tell the story. Like, that there's a core of truth there. Like, I like Obi-Wan, and then sort of how that's developed over time. And it's a lot of fun to like totally change your mind on things too. So I think it's a lifelong love that you can, like, Sarah was saying, like over time change, and I love that. But I do think like it's for kids, yes, and
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Matt?
So I'm going to give not the simplest answer, but just like I think it was marketed for kids, but I think it can be enjoyed by everybody. I think that and I think that there are some things that definitely had adults in mind, because like I'll look at the Clone Wars, for instance, and I'm just like, did they just walk into a bar? Like, are those pole dancers? Like, this is on Cartoon Network. Like, so, it's kind of like, yeah, they're for kids, but at the same time, it's like, you don't necessarily show this to young kids. Like, there are some things that are like, you could argue are like teen to young adult to like.
As a kid, watching Asajj pull a guy, the clone, into a lightsaber and then kiss him, and I was like,
Yeah.
I feel funny.
Right? Like, it's just kind of like, like, it's like those undertones that like you don't really think of until you're an adult. So yes, it's made for kids, but it's something that you can enjoy throughout your entire life. And I see it less from like a writing perspective, and more from, because I'm the art teacher, obviously I see things from more a creative perspective. Like when I was younger, like when I was drawing and stuff, like I'd watch Star Wars and everything. I'm gonna design my own pod racer. I'm gonna design my own lightsaber. I drew so many versions of lightsabers in my notebooks, and I apologize to all the English teachers out there. I had ADD like crazy. I'd be like, the teacher would be saying one thing, and I'd just be like, I like to say, I'm a great teacher. I like to think of myself as a great teacher. I'm a terrible student. Like I would be doodling constantly and coming up with new ideas and new designs. And I think Star Wars inspires a lot of creative minds, like a lot of people that grow up and make films, a lot of people that grow up and do like prop design, say their inspiration was Star Wars. Like they watched that as a kid and was like, look at how they're pushing visual effects. It's going to be taught for years to come in film school, in like any type of visual VFX design. This will be taught forever as like the pioneer. The effects today hold up, which is insane. Even like, you know, they've been touched up a bit, but even if you look at some of like the original footage, it holds up, like considering what they had at the time. Um, and I think it's that inspiration and that creativity that is going to constantly push. It still pushes me today, like just to be like, this is why I got into doing what I do on TikTok. It's just like kind of like I still love this, and I'm going to share what I love with everybody else, and it helps me become more creative. Like so, it's still inspiring me to this day, and I think it's going to continue to inspire me and a lot of other people for forever.
I mean, that one scene that will play in my mind forever. That's perfect. It's very slow and it feels long, but the Millennium Falcon landing on the Death Star, and it's in that slow motion, and the music is like amping up, and that scene is perfect. Even today, like even without touching, if you found the original, it looks amazing, and you're like, what? Why is this so good? How do they do this? um, how about you? How about you, friend?
Yeah, I mean, it feels almost trite to say just Star Wars is for everyone, but like, the concept of children's literature, for example, as a genre is relatively recent phenomenon, like separating out children's fiction from YA fiction, from adult fiction. I think this is recent, and I think it's not always as necessary as we might think it is. I think, to echo what everyone has been saying, like Star Wars exists for all ages. And so, yes, it's for kids. It definitely is. And yes, it's for adults. It definitely is. And of course, there will be a different response to it at each of those ages. But I think, as far as the impact it has on kids, like Julia was saying earlier, I think all forms of storytelling and receiving stories, reading them or watching them, it's all an act of empathy, right? It's all like, this is a quote I put on my syllabus every year from a John Green video, but like, it's always an imagining of what it's like to be someone else. I think Star Wars makes it easy to exercise that empathy. And I liked what you were saying earlier about Star Wars being this sort of modern mythology, because I think it is in a lot of ways. And I think it's like priming us to recognize these archetypes and these stories that have existed for a very long time. So like, I think of the first episode of Star Wars English class, we talked about Anakin Skywalker and the tragic hero, right? This trope or archetype that has existed for a very long time. So I guess like Star Wars is a gateway to other stories, and that's great. I think that's great. I think it's really wonderful that like kids have that.
Yeah, I also like to think that it is a way to explain painful and even shameful like historical events and frame them in a way that someone who's too young to look into Germany in the 40s or or but can understand, okay, the Wookiees were enslaved. I like Chewbacca. That's bad. So I mean, like I said, that is part of teaching the empathy portion of it, and there's just because nothing in Star Wars is a true 1-to-1 ratio. You know, Lucas was a student of history, but nothing is a direct 1-to-1 ratio. So you can just say, "Oh, this is that. This is that." I think it forces you to understand, as a young person, complex ideas that you don't fully grasp until much later, and then you're like, "Oh, yeah, Palpatine did what Julius Caesar did," you know, or whatever. I don't know. That's kind of how I think about it. But man, this has been an
I do like the
amazing.
idea, Fern, that you said what you needed to say and just said, and that's it.
It was very
And
dramatic.
just left.
I was trying to mute
Theater
myself,
kids.
and I did hang up.
No. Okay, so I want to thank everyone for coming on. This has been a wonderful conversation that I've very, very much enjoyed. If I can go around one last time, and I'll have everyone say once again where we can find you and your amazing content, as well as what you're expecting or looking forward to on Disney Day this Friday. All right, and I will start with Miss Marauder first.
Yeah, hey. So you can find me on TikTok at Ms. Marauder. I am a tiny little content creator, so I'm not a big deal. But cons are coming back, and I'm going to be out cosplaying a lot of Star Wars stuff with my daughter. So expect some very chaotic videos of that. If you like adorable children, I don't know. That seems like a weird plug. I'm hoping we get a scrap of Andor on Disney Plus Day. Because I am a Rogue One fanatic. I love it, and I can't wait. I know everyone's hoping for Obi-Wan stuff. I am also, yes, but I'm jonesing for some Andor content. So if we get that, I'll be very, very happy.
Awesome. And Julia?
Buster, what do you want? Sorry, I had to make sure Buster made his podcast appearance. So yeah, I think just for the sake of the Rogue One stands, Emily Stardust M needs Andor content for her well-being, and I feel so bad, for the Rogue One stands. I'm very excited for that as well. I don't know, the idea of getting like a trailer this far in advance for Kenobi doesn't seem likely in terms of how they've been doing things, but I'm not sure. As I mentioned, 5 or 6 years old, I had a doll, played with my Barbies. Like, I am at a level of like commitment to this man that I don't know if I think I might just like implode. Like, I might just cease to exist if I see a Kenobi trailer. So like, if after Friday I am like removed from the timeline, that's probably what happened. Is that I saw the content and it was too much, and there was like some sort of singularity that was reached, and then I just kind of like ceased to exist. So obviously Obi-Wan, but I just kind of want to have a little bit more concrete understanding of all of the new projects coming up, because we don't even really know what any of them are about plot-wise. Not that we did for like The Mandalorian. So I am excited to see Obi-Wan content, but also worried that it will cause a like paradox in the universe. So like, tentatively excited. But yes, I'd love to know more about Andor too, because I know that they're wrapped filming that as well.
So everyone, make sure you check on Julia after Friday,
make sure
just to make sure
doing okay.
Is she safe. All right, and Mattman.
So you can find me at the Mattman Show. It's the_Mattman_show. I put it as my name here on TikTok, and I would be very surprised if we did not get anything Star Wars at all. So I think we're definitely going to get something Star Wars. I don't care what it is. I will be happy. But I'm really, really hoping I'll be the basic one and say Kenobi, because I've been wanting this show for forever. I don't care if it's just a left to right shot of like the desert and then just the back of Obi-Wan's head. I just want something. Like, that's all I'm asking for at this point. But I'm just going to be excited for whatever they dish out.
Awesome. I love it. Also, before going to Fern, I also real quick have to ask the chat because before we started, Julia was wondering whether or not she should do a reaction video for the if we get something for the first time. So, does anyone in the chat want to see Julia's reaction? Let us know. We'll see. But Fern.
You can find me on TikTok at Always Fern. I took a little bit of a hiatus, but I am making my way back onto the platform.
Fern is back. Everybody celebrate. Get out in the streets. Tell your friends.
Spread the word. I also do a podcast with Julia, Star Wars English Class. You can follow us on TikTok and Twitter at Swinglish Class. I have no expectations for Disney Plus Day. I refuse to have expectations. Expectations means getting my hopes up, and and I just can't risk that right now. So I'm gonna stay. If I share some of Julia's nervousness if we get any Kenobi stuff. I don't know if I'm in the sort of emotional place to receive that at this time, but no expectations, just general excitement.
Okay, I can respect that. Hey, at least we're better than the Spider-Man fandom. So, yeah. But yeah, we're getting because I definitely want a Julia reaction. We're getting Julia. You need to. Yes. Yeah. Thoughts and prayers to Julia. We're gonna need that reaction. But more than that, once again, thank you guys all for being willing to come on here and nerd out. It's cool to like spend time with different subsections of the fandom and like see how things connect. All of you guys are gonna be welcome on back here if you haven't been here before for different topics. Sarah, I plan to go back through and do another Rogue One episode at some point in time, so you're pre-invited to that. But
it'll just be me crying. It'll just be like, I know how it ends, but I'm still so sad.
I started this podcast when I was a really small creator, and there was I just didn't know a lot of people. So if I can get you and Stardust M, I would just be so happy. That's all I would need. But there's a lot of amazing people, so it's gonna be great. Anyways, thank you for everyone in the chat for hanging out with us, and everyone who's listening to this in the future, wherever podcasts are. You already know where it is because you're listening to it now, so I won't tell you. Also, another quick announcement, and the details on this are still being sort of worked out, but there's a few creators and I that are doing a tabletop RPG that is Star Wars themed. We already have some amazing artwork. We're actually recording the whole thing tomorrow, but there'll be episodes that'll be coming out on the channel. We're going to break it down probably into 4 different ones so that you guys can follow along with our journey. And hopefully it's awesome, and we do a lot more of them. So stay tuned for more news on that. Love everyone. Peace, and may the Force be with you always.
And also with you.
And with your